We've looked at Katana versus Rapier, but now let's look at Katana versus Rapier and Dagger. Hi folks, Matt Easton here, Schola Gladiatoria. So first up I should state, I am in no way a Japanese martial arts expert, but you could perhaps say I am a European martial arts expert. So I'm going to look at this from the point of view of a person with a sword of the proportions and statistics of a katana against someone with a rapier and dagger. Now, when I made those previous videos, I looked at the overall rapier versus dagger. I'll put the links below, in fact, to the previous videos if you haven't seen those already. So I've looked at the overall advantages that the rapier has over a katana, some of the advantages that a katana can have over a rapier, but moreover, I also did a follow-up video, which was by popular request, looking at how the katana user can try to get over the advantages that the rapier user has, which are primarily to do with length and reach and hand protection. And it must be said that the rapier has a lot of advantages, certainly in reach, assuming it is a long rapier. But regardless, katana at this time, if we're talking about the 16th, 17th centuries, katana are a lot shorter than most European swords and are, unless they're particularly large, you know, if we're talking about odashi and things like that, but a typical katana is shorter than a typical European sword. And overall, a typical katana is certainly shorter than a typical rapier. So in terms of reach advantage, and I think we have to agree in terms of hand protection, the European sword has the advantage. Now, if we therefore compare where the person using a rapier also has a dagger, you would think that is purely going to be an even more OP option. Well, is it? We're going to unpack that. We're going to look into the details of that. How much more of an advantage is it? Is it actually an advantage? But equally, we're going to look at the fact that the katana isn't always used by itself and is sometimes used in certain other combinations with other things, which we'll look at in a minute. But before we delve into those issues, a very quick word from our very kind sponsors for this video, are the awesome Mova Globes. This video today is sponsored by Mova Globes. Brilliant offer down below. Now, I love Mova Globes. I've actually had one for quite a while, and they make absolutely awesome presents. If you're wondering how they work, they seem to magically rotate inside. They're powered by light, so long as you've got UV light, they simply sit there under natural light and they rotate. As you can see here, you can pick them up and they float around inside the ball. It's quite mesmerizing, there we go. And of course you can get a variety of different stands. So you've got a whole bunch of different designs, you've got planets, you've got all sorts of funky modern designs. So if you want to buy this for a present for someone for Christmas or whatever, then this is absolutely awesome. There's a load of choice there. There's different sizes, different designs, and also different stands that you can put them on as well. And you know, honestly, the educational value of these is amazing as well. Being able to see a globe in your hand, pick it up whenever you like, is a really good way of reminding you where all the countries are, which is very useful for a channel like this when we're talking about weapons and cultures from all over the world. Everyone in my family loves our Mova Globe, and all of our guests want to come in and pick it up. They always want to ask about it, they want to ask how it works, and kids love it as well, and it gets them interested in geography. So my special offer for you today is that if you go to movaglobes.com or click on the link below, using the discount code SCHOLAR, you can get 10% off the 6 or the 8-inch globes. And there's a whole bunch of variety there, there's all sorts of options, and thanks once again to Mova Globes for sponsoring this channel and this video. So thanks for sticking with me. Now let's get back to the main topic of this video. So from the outset, it looks to me like most of you would think that the European, whether they're Spanish or Dutch or Portuguese, whatever, English maybe, with a rapier, just with a rapier alone, but with a rapier and dagger, is going to have a huge advantage over a person with just a katana. And I would argue, yes, that's basically true. Okay, I'm not going to beat around the bush. I would say that in a one-on-one fight, and I'm going to talk about other types of fighting in a minute, but in a one-on-one fight, it is basically the case that yes, a rapier and dagger, one-on-one, in a duel, in an open space, where you can move around and there's no armor involved, there's no, you know, firearms, there's no other people. In this one-on-one duel scenario, the simple fact is that the person with a katana is at a big disadvantage. The katana is nowhere near as long as the rapier. Yes, it can cut better than a rapier, but you've got to be able to get close enough to do so. And I did look at that in my previous video, how you can try and bypass the rapier, but the rapier can do things to cancel that out. So, you know, it's not like they're like magic techniques that allow you to bypass the problems put in front of you by the bloody great rapier. So, yes, the single rapier has an advantage over the single katana most of the time, certainly in getting the first strike in, and really the katana user is going to have to be looking at minimizing the chances of taking a fatal skewer on the way in, and maybe taking some damage on the way in so that they can land a fatal blow when they get into distance to be able to hit. And that's going to be the main challenge, is getting within range of the rapierist. And remember, the rapierist, even if you knock aside, push aside, hit aside their blade and move in, they can always retract their blade and have another go. They can move backwards, they can move offline, they can grapple with their left hand even if they don't have something in their left hand. So the fact is that you would think, therefore, that if we're now looking in a scenario where the person with a rapier also has a dagger, it's going to be even more difficult for the katana user. And basically the answer is yes, that is true. That is the case, okay? Because the simple fact is that one of the disadvantages of a rapier, and it has many advantages, but one of the disadvantages is being a long weapon obviously gives a huge amount of reach. But as I've said, you can pull it back, you can retract it, just the same as with the spear. If someone pushes your point aside, it's not just get past the point, as they say in certain books and movies. It's not as simple as that, because you get past the point, they can pull the point back, or they can disengage and move the point to somewhere else and come in from a new angle. They can move around on their feet, they can run backwards, they can retreat. If you're in an open space, you can literally run backwards and keep stabbing. And you can run backwards almost as fast, for a short distance, as fast as someone can run forwards. So being able to just, if someone knocks your point aside, being able to retract it back at the same time as running back and then have another go at them, it's really difficult. It's the same reason that fighting against spears is so difficult. But even if the katana wielder does manage to get aside or grab or do something to this blade here, the problem now is not only have you got a weapon which you can offend with in this hand as well, but in addition it's at a different range, it's at a shorter range, and you can block with it. Now let's just have a little look at the features of the left-hand dagger for a second. Now, not all left-hand daggers are made equal. Some have more hand protection, some have less even than this. This has got fairly extensive curved quillons, guard. This is a version by Katana, incidentally, one that I regularly use in fencing. And this has a side ring and these large curved quillons. And notice that they are out of line with the blade, and this enables you to catch and trap blades more easily. It's not held usually that way, although funnily enough, if you look in some treatises, you can actually see them being held that way. But the way that I predominantly use it, and most people use them, is they put their thumb up the inside flat and you have the ring on the outside there. And you essentially catch things here in the quillons, control. But obviously if someone manages to get past your rapier, if they occupy your rapier and come in close this way, then you've obviously got this as a shanking weapon as well. Now, you will, if you're familiar with Japanese weapons, know that actually in Japan there's a type of parrying device that was used by law enforcers, by police and people like this, called a jite, which is essentially a iron bar, which does actually have some parallels with the left-hand dagger here. I have to say they are more substantial, and you can strike with them. They're a bit like a crowbar, essentially, with a quillon on one side. The quillon is smaller, but they are more substantial than these. So these are more offensive, I would say, than the Japanese item. But this has a larger guard and has certain other advantages. So, by and large, this is a great parrying device, but it's also an offensive device, and as I mentioned, it operates at a different range. So often when we think about getting past a pole weapon like a spear or staff or even a sword in this case, then we think about kind of like once you've got within a certain range, you with your shorter weapon are now at an advantage, and that's usually true when we've just got one weapon versus one weapon. But if your shorter range is this, well, this is an even shorter range. So in many senses, if the person with the katana manages to get inside the formidably huge range of your rapier and charge in with their katana, bear in mind, even if they've pushed that point aside, you can still parry with the rapier in certain ways and defend with the dagger. And actually, what you could do is counter-close. So if the person with the katana has managed to get within the range of your rapier and is closing in, what you could actually do is pass with the back foot into them and actually anticipate them in and go in with your dagger. So you've got a whole bunch of options. The other thing you can do as well is don't always think about necessarily defend and offend or defend and offend. These aren't always doing separate actions. Sometimes they're joining together to do a single thing. So if someone comes in with a very, very strong cut with something like a two-handed sword or a halberd, you can join these two things together momentarily, like a sword and buckler, in order to strengthen up your parry. So you can actually provide the cross with the two things together, in other words, triangulate your arms, better body mechanics behind it. You've got the strength of both arms behind it and your full torso. And then having done that, you can keep one there occupying that weapon while disengaging and coming off with the other one. So the simple fact is that in most cases, the person with the katana is in really big trouble in a one-on-one scenario. Now, many of you at this point will be screaming at the screen and going, but the katana user will also have another weapon in their hand. They will have a wakizashi. Well, they might, okay? If they have a wakizashi and a katana, then a lot of the things I've just said for the rapier and dagger might also go for these two. And in fact, that's great. Yeah, that's absolutely great. And in many, many ways, if they have a katana and wakizashi together, that is very likely to be a more effective way for them to fight against the person with a rapier, whether they've got just a single rapier or whether they've got a rapier and dagger, because that enables them to cross the rapier's point with one of these weapons and then charge in with the other one. And that obviously is going to be advantageous. So yes, if they have these two together, then that's going to help redress the balance, and that's going to be massively advantageous. If you happen to be a circa 1600 AD swordsman, particularly if you're Japanese, then my recommendation to you is indeed to get yourself a pole weapon, is to get yourself a firearm, which all people would probably do on both sides. But yes, indeed, to use the katana and the wakizashi together. Overall, against European swordsmen, whether they have a single sword or whether they have a rapier and dagger or a side sword and dagger, you are going to be at a disadvantage if you have just a single katana. So absolutely, yes, single katana, disadvantageous. Using a wakizashi as well helps redress the balance. But here's some historical context for you. So when I made those previous videos, a number of people pointed this out. They said, but the rapier man should be using a dagger as well, and the katana person should be using a wakizashi as well, and wouldn't the Japanese person be wearing armor? So let's address those points now. So first of all, a lot of people in war, so if we put this into the historical context of, piracy or war, raiding, whatever, in the 1500s and into the 1600s, a lot of people in war did not carry these secondary objects in their left hand. If you look at, if you don't believe me, go and look at Japanese art. If you go and look at Japanese art of the 1500s and 1600s, very, very often a person only has one weapon in their hand. And that's, sometimes because of that's all they have. Sometimes it's to do with convenience of wearing something. Sometimes it's because their main job is to shoot a firearm or load cannons or shoot a bow or use a yari or spear or halberd or partisan, depending which side you're on. So there are many reasons why you might not have another weapon in your other hand, because this is very often the sword, whether it's the Japanese one or the European one, is very often a backup weapon, not your primary weapon, and therefore you just don't bother carrying the thing to go in the other hand. So remember, there's a big difference here between realities of war in history and duels. Okay? So the first thing is you might not have the second thing. Now, comparatively speaking, I would say in this particular period, as far as I can see from the period artwork, it's slightly more common for Europeans to have something in their other hand, such as a shield, a buckler, or a left-hand dagger, than it was for Japanese swordsmen. Seems to have been more common for Japanese swordsmen to have their two-handed sword in two hands. The clue is in the design of the sword. It is a two-handed sword. So katanas were predominantly used two-handed, and not, at this time, predominantly used dual wielding, if you want to call it that, with a wakizashi in the other hand. Yes, everybody knows Masashi was a fan of that, but he wasn't necessarily normal, and we shouldn't take Masashi as being but we also know Masashi also used oars and other things in two hands. He often used a sword by itself as well, or a stick. So I think Europeans at this time are more likely to have, like I say, a dagger or a buckler or a shield or whatever in their left hand, which gives them a big fighting advantage, potentially, in close-in range. But there is another factor which we have to bear in mind as well, and that is massed combat. So we're talking about historical reality here. And the fact is that whether we're jumping onto an enemy ship or whether we're running onto a beach to do some raiding or this kind of stuff, the fact is that the realities of what's good in a one-on-one duel is often very different to what's good in rooms, in forests, in swamps, in massed melees with people rolling all around. And the fact is that, in my view, that's really, as I said in my previous video, that's really where the katana comes into its own. And this was even noted in World War II as well. And when we look at the adoption of the Kyugunto in Japan and then going back to the Shingunto, it was their opinion, from people I know who study this, who've told me, is their opinion that they decided that this was a better, essentially close melee weapon for battlefield conditions than the Kyugunto was, because the Kyugunto was really emulating European swords that perhaps to some degree might make better dueling weapons, but might not be so good in a massed brawl in a confined space. So actually, bear in mind this, while you might be feeling a bit disheartened if you're a fan of the katana and Japanese martial arts, that I have just basically told you that in a one-on-one duel, I think that 9 times out of 10, the person with a rapier and dagger is going to absolutely annihilate people using a katana, assuming both people are similar level. Obviously, if one person's very skilled and the other person's mediocre or a beginner, that's a different kettle of fish. But if both people are roughly similar skill levels, I would say, generally speaking, the person with the rapier and dagger is going to win 9 times out of 10, most of the time. Okay, it's even bigger, disparity than it was between just a rapier and a katana. But pulling back that and hoping that you're not too disheartened, I actually think that in a mass brawl, in many ways, the katana held two-handed is a better weapon because having two hands on it gives you more ability to double up attacks and keep changing direction and redouble your attacks. Very powerful cuts. I think very often a thrust, unless it happens to hit through a vital target of your torso, throat or face with a rapier, if it goes through your limbs, often it's going to go through and you'll be kind of okay, whereas very often a strong cut with a katana will lop a part off and you will very much not be okay. But obviously it's a short-range weapon. And the other thing is in a grappling scenario as well. We actually see quite a lot of grappling with rapier and rapier and dagger as well. And obviously if you get the point in, that can help bring an end to the grapple. But with a katana, even if the edge is laid on a target and you're at very close range, the simple edge geometry and design of the blade means that drawing it through gives absolutely horrific great draw cuts, which can be instantly incapacitating. So, to conclude, I would say, and I've probably been already completely clear about this, one-on-one, in a duel, in an open space, rapier and dagger, I think, absolutely annihilates two-handed katana by itself. I do think that if we now introduce a wakizashi into the mix, then that massively helps redress the imbalance. I still think these two are at a disadvantage against rapier and dagger. but I think the disadvantage is way smaller now, and I think the person with both of these things together stands a good chance in a duel. In war, I think if you're talking about effective weapons for soldiers, not necessarily officers or leaders, but soldiers to inflict maximum casualties very quickly on a group of enemies, I actually think that the katana is probably a superior weapon to the rapier or the rapier and dagger. So therefore, I think essentially these are two very different weapons made for different priorities, different purposes, different reasons, and they each have very different strengths and weaknesses. I hope that's been enjoyable to watch. If you massively disagree, that's fine. Get posting down below. Tell me what you disagree with, and maybe I'll look into it. Maybe I'll learn a bit more. Maybe I'll come away from this knowing more than I did before, which is always a great thing. Educate me, point me towards things. Historical examples as well. I do actually have some in my back pocket. I'll be looking at historical examples in the future. But if you've got some good ones, point them out to me, and maybe there'll be ones that I don't already know about. But yeah, if you've got different views, if you've got the same views, I'm interested to hear your comments down below. Thanks a lot for watching. I have been Matt Easton, and I will continue to be.